If I was to meditate for X total minutes a day, how should I distribute those X minutes? Okay, it depends on a trade-off between depth, reaching a profound state of focus, and frequency, resetting your nervous system throughout the day. Generally, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes for the mind to settle and the sediment of thought to sink to the bottom. If you split your time too aggressively, you may never get past the surface chatter. Here's a recommended distribution for each time tier X broken down by depth strategy. So it gives a bunch of options. So 10 minutes, do not split no matter what. For 20 minutes, two options. You could do 120 or you could do 10 morning, 10 evening, but then you don't get past that 10 to 15 minute mark. We got 30 minutes, 2010 or 130. 40 minutes, we could go 2020, etc. But this led me to, and it gave me a little graphic that probably has nothing to do with what it was actually saying. Depends on technique and temperament, I would think. Hence many say just experiment. Exactly, yep. So I wanted to get a better sense of what would be the reasons why I would do one versus the other. So I said I'm at 1340. This was, I guess, 3 days ago. And I add 5 seconds every day. So it kind of proposed that until I get to 25 minutes, I should just keep doing a single session. And then at somewhere around 25 to 30, consider whether I want to keep it at one session or switch to two. I feel like the trade-off is that, following my understanding on the literature about learning, more frequent sessions is more efficient at internalizing the skill over time. So I was kind of just speculating that we know that if you were to do a skill more frequently, rather than at the same length of time total, more sparsely, that you get more gains, I guess. It's a more effective strategy at learning in the long term. So I was kind of considering this thing. However, if I'm unable to actually exercise important aspects of mindfulness skills at lower durations, then it won't matter if I do it twice versus once a day. My question really is, what kind of skills would I be strengthening if I did it short duration many times versus long duration? And that's where we got into this nice response. In almost every domain, learning a language, playing the piano, shooting free throws, distributed practice beats mass practice, one long session. However, meditation is a unique exception to this rule at lower time tiers because of the mental setup cost. Here is why your intuition is right for most skills, but why splitting your current 13 minutes would likely backfire. The setup cost problem. Unlike practicing a tennis serve, where you can walk onto the court and hit a perfect serve in the first minute, meditation has a biological warm-up period. So 0 to 10 minutes, this is the settling phase. Your nervous system is dumping excess norepinephrine. Your default mode network is still spinning. You are processing the residue of the last few hours. And then 10 plus minutes, give or take, this is where the training officially begins. It depends what we mean by training here, but the sediment settles and you can actually observe the mind rather than just fight it. Okay, that's true of some techniques, but not others, I would say. Appropriate for things like Zen, less appropriate for things like Samatha. Feel free to ask AI about that thinking. Okay, I'm gonna keep that in my clipboard. If you're strict about not moving, then long sits can be better. Okay. The math at 14 minutes, one 14-minute session. So, you actually get some time of the high quality training, whatever that means here. And then if you were to split that, you get 0 minutes of that. So the two types of mindfulness skills, this is the real thing that I was looking for. Skills that require duration, the deep skills, would be something like sustained attention, the ability to hold focus for extended periods of time without flickering. You cannot train endurance in 5-minute bursts. Equanimity with discomfort, learning to sit through boredom, an itch, or the urge to check your phone. This only happens when you sit longer than you want. Subtle detection, catching very quiet, subtle distractions like a slight change in mood requires a very still, settled mind. So this is like the most important thing, I think, for me right now. I want to be able to get to the point where I can notice subtle changes in my mood or just, consciousness in general, which I don't think I'm getting from my current practice, but we're getting there. Skill, maybe I'm getting it slightly now. Because I'm kind of noticing like I can feel like similarities in states like in dopaminergic states or states of like brain fog and stuff like that. With all these optimization ideas, there is the underlying layer that it manifests differently for all people, right? Yep. So it's there's not a one size fits all. I guess I was trying to get to the how should I go about choosing for me? Like what's on the menu here? So on a personal level, that lens becomes more important, right? And for me, I think it's going to be more important that I Well, that I get both of these skills, but it does seem like I'm going to want skills from each of these, because skills that require frequency, the wide skills, the wake up moment, remembering to be mindful during the day or during daily life, during a certain experience. This I need to also strengthen, not just by doing the, sitting mindfulness meditations, but at some point I should start incorporating mindfulness into specific activities throughout the day. State shifting, quickly down regulating stress during a workday. So this, I think I'm building right now. Like I can tell that like this intuitively fits what I'm experiencing. So at 1340, you are still building the deep skills. If you switch frequency now, you sacrifice the endurance training necessary to ever get deep. So I think I like the idea of continuing until 20 to 25 minutes at least. Then to switch, when to switch logic. You are right that frequency is better for internalizing the skill into your personality, making it a trait rather than a state. Ayo. This is why the morning-evening split becomes the gold standard, but only once you have enough capital to pay the setup cost twice. So you only have enough time for one warm-up, keep it masked. But at 30 minutes, I don't know if I'm going to go past 30 minutes, but you have 30 minutes. You could spend 20 in the morning and then 10 in the evening. So this might be like a beneficial goal state for us, or for me. I mean, easiest way to measure is what motivates me to spend more total time meditating. Okay, and generally noticing patterns of what you find effective. Yeah, I like counting the breath while doing chores. That's a nice, easy one to get into. Nice. There's also a similarity to physical exercise where you hit a muscle from a different angle and then notice a difference. If you're doing long sits, then switch to short ones, there can be that effect. Right, yeah, I do. At some point, especially during March, I want to start messing with other techniques, and I think it would be beneficial for me to have a good familiarity with at least like a bedrock technique. Same thing is said about morning versus evening practice. Okay, nice. Very cool, very cool. All right, that's where it was. Okay, how does this relate to Zen versus Samatha? Morning versus evening practice. Okay, brain chemistry is also different in those two times. True, so can feel different. All right, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I think I like the idea. So, you know what? I've been doing it at both, like first thing in the morning, middle of the day, and end of the day. And I guess I haven't done it long enough to experience similarity or difference. They seem similar, but there's probably key differences, especially relating to how my brain is able to regulate the default mode network and just inhibitions in general. So I kind of go in knowing that, but I don't think it really affects the practice much. Difference is more pronounced, in my opinion, if you are just doing one or the other, and yeah, if you're deeper. Okay. Yeah, I'm curious, though, if I were to have a practice eventually that has the beginning of the day and the end of the day, if I notice key differences over time. All right, the masked versus distributed debate maps perfectly onto the distinction between Samatha, concentration, and Zen, specifically shikantaza, or just sitting. Am I supposed to not... was it the case that I'm not supposed to put emphasis on any of the syllables, like shikantaza, rather than doing what I've been doing, which is like putting the emphasis there? All right, while both traditions generally favor longer sessions for beginners, mass practice, they do so for completely different mechanical reasons. Wow. Here's how your current strategy applies to each path. So the goal is one pointed focus. You are training the mind to stay on a single object, like the breath, to the exclusion of everything else. So this is not quite the practice I'm following, given that I'm trying to keep a hold on the breath, but I'm allowing myself to notice other things and not to necessarily try to block them or exclude them. That said, it seems like the fact that I am keeping a focus on the breath is affecting my ability to keep hold on something else, which I think is pretty neat. Like the brain can't focus on so many things at once, so by forcing yourself to stay grounded to the breath, then these other thoughts are unable to take as much real estate. The mind is like a turbulent fan. It takes physically quantifiable time to spin down. If you split your time into short chunks, you're essentially restarting the fan every time it begins to slow down, right? Samatha demands mass practice, and then Zen, choiceless awareness. You are not trying to get anywhere or focus on anything. So I'm doing something in between, actually. I'm trying to focus on the breath, but allow something else to occupy whatever space is left over. You are simply sitting with things as they are. Theoretically zero, practically high. Zen masters will tell you there is no transition. Nirvana is right here. So this is a Sam Harrisism. You can do Zen in a split second. For a beginner, the setup in Zen is the time it takes for you to get bored. In Zen, the training effect often kicks in exactly when you want to stop. The itch on your nose, the pain in your knee, the boredom, that is the curriculum. Okay, it favors mass practice, but for different reason. You need the duration to exhaust your ego's struggle against the present moment. If you stop every 10 minutes, you are bailing out right when the real work begins. The micro hit exception. This is actually a core part of both traditions, but they treat it as a separate practice from the formal sitting. I see. So, okay, yeah, so a Samatha exercise during the day would be something like focusing on your coffee. All right, so then is this appropriate for things like Zen, less appropriate for things like Samatha? Your current strategy of one single session that gradually increases is actually highly appropriate for both Zen and Samatha, but for different structural reasons. In Samatha, you are trying to generate a state of absorption or stable axis concentration. This requires revving the engine until it sustains its momentum. By slowly extending your single session, you are training your mind to sustain focus for longer periods. You are building the mental muscle that prevents the mind from flickering. So that's kind of what I'm doing in turn with the breath. The goal is, but yeah, this is also at play during my practice where the work of Zen often begins exactly when you want it to stop. So this, this didn't require that. It didn't require the 14 minutes. This required just the 10 really for me. And probably even less than that. With the 10-minute meditation, this was probably happening at 5 minutes. If you split your time into comfortable 10-minute chunks, you subconsciously avoid the confrontation with your own resistance. But yeah, of course, our brain is changing as we follow a meditation practice over time, and thus what would originally be a difficult practice, a difficult session, would not be difficult anymore. And now these itches of trying to stop or wanting to stop keeps getting extended. It's farther back. It's making the point that Samatha, you normally want to go deep into a specific state of concentration, then maybe hit the jhanas where long sits are beneficial. But you see when the Zen technique is done in Tibet, they recommend practicing short times, many times, because the technique is somewhat related to an attitude to be maintained throughout the day. And the thing they are noticing requires not build up. Well, I'm gonna throw this in here. It's hard to talk about any optimal way to meditate because we are talking about such a large group of things that each manifests personally differently. Right? It's like talking about the optimal yoga technique, and it's really based on what you want to get out of the practice. All right, you are referring to Dzogchen tradition, often called Tibetan Zen, because like Zen, it aims for a direct non-dual awareness. The specific instruction you are thinking of is short moments many times, popularized by masters like Uryen Rinpoche, Tulku Uryen Rinpoche. Oh, okay, the Rinpoche that taught Harris. Yep, awesome. This advice exists because Dzogchen has a completely different goal than Samatha or Japanese Zen. Here is why the short times logically applies there, and whether you should switch to it at your current duration. All right, the logic of short moments. The goal is recognition, not maintenance. You're trying to glimpse the natural state of mind. This state is already perfect. You cannot build it. You can only recognize it. That's fine. I think this discounts how much your mind changes over your practice and over your practice in the sense of over a session, similar to what we discussed previously. After 10 minutes, things are changing in the brain, and then also over your practice. So there is a different type of, you could say a different type of state of mind that you get over a long practice, a 6-month practice. That being said, the Dzogchen would probably point out that, hey, like the conditions of that state of mind though are still the same, and that's what you're looking for. This state is already perfect. You cannot build it. You can only recognize it. The problem with long sits, if a beginner tries to hold this state for 20 minutes, they usually succeed for the first 30 seconds. For the remaining 19 minutes and 30 seconds, they are just thinking about the state or zoning out. It is better to have 100 flashes of pure fresh gold, lasting 3 seconds each, than 20 minutes of brass. Fake imitation meditation. Wow. The logic of long sits. Okay, how similar is the Dzogchen practice and the lucid dreaming technique of, what were these called? Something checks? Reality checks. All right, the mechanical similarity between Dzogchen's short moments and lucid dreaming's reality checks is not just a coincidence. They operate on the exact same neurological and psychological principle, habituated state recognition. In fact, in the Tibetan tradition of dream yoga, these two practices are explicitly linked. So punctuation, both practices rely on breaking the autopilot script of your daily life. In lucid dreaming, you're sleepwalking through your day. By doing a reality check, for example, is this a dream? Look at my hands. You puncture the narrative. And you can do that. I think one of the methods is every time you walk through a door, look at your hands or do a reality check, whatever your reality check is. And hopefully in the dream, you would do that and realize you're awake. However, there's always the chance that you do that in a dream and you think, oh, I'm not in a dream in your dream. And that's an issue. You stop being a character in the movie and become the audience watching it. You are sleepwalking through samsara, directed by thoughts. By doing a short moment, glimpsing the nature of mind, you puncture the conceptual stream. You stop being the thinker and recognize the awareness that holds the thought. If you don't do it while you are awake, you won't do it while you are dreaming. The brain needs to be trained to check in reflexively. All right, I feel like I jumped past the rest of this initial response. Here, there is a trap. 13 minutes is already considered long for a beginner glimpse, but short for stability. If you split that into 2 7 minutes, okay, you might end up in the dead zone. Too long for. Okay, so yeah, that would be the worst. But yeah, I think I'm looking more towards the longer practice, trying to notice the specific changes in affect. So when dopamine catches me, or when some negative emotional state takes hold, and to pay attention to that, and in a very Dzogchen way, to notice like what is actually happening in a holistic sense in my consciousness. Yeah, the question is, I mean, pragmatically, how much can I actually get done in a day? But also, at what point do I feel like there's diminishing returns on what I'm really trying to get at, which is something like growing this channel and being productive in the stuff that I'm doing while having a job. That's going to be a tricky thing for me to feel out, but at least with this slow incremental climb, that's not a huge difficulty right now.